Just be prepared to fail because when you first starting out, whether you're gonna go solo or whether you're gonna go with the team, there's gonna be a lot of no's before you hear an yes. People say, rejection, it's not only part of the process, but when we get enough rejection, they're just information. They're not rejection anymore.
Welcome to America's Inner Circle, the podcast that dives deep into the stories, strategies, and secrets of the most successful real estate agents in the game. Whether you're an aspiring agent, a seasoned pro, or just love a good success story, you're in the right place. Each episode, we sit down with top agents who share their journey from the ground up, how they overcame challenges, seized opportunities, and made their mark in the competitive world of real estate. Ready to learn from the best? Let's unlock the keys to real estate success together. Here is your peek into the Inner Circle.
Thanks for joining the Inner Circle podcast. I'm Mel Allen, your host, and today we're going to be joined by a guy, and I love this hook that you have with your name, Yuqi. Now, Yuqi is Gucci with a Y.
That's funny.
And you know what? It's memorable. Like, you have a great hook for your name. People obviously know who Gucci is. And it's going to be hard to forget you.
Yeah, that's exactly how I came up with it. Because if I just say Yuqi, I have to repeat so many times. But when I make that name association, it makes it easier for both parties, not just me, but for the other people as well.
It really does. And last name, so it's Yuqi Luo, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we are talking to you because you're an up-and-comer in the real estate field, and you have some good wins behind you, and it looks like you have a pretty interesting life as well. And we will tag you and your social media in this, so just make sure if there's something you don't want us to share.
Sure.
But I'm sure that it's all good. So why don't we talk a little bit about kind of how things got started for you, and tell us about your journey of how you got into real estate. What led you to this path?
When I was finishing up my last 2 semesters of college, I just was really trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life, and I just didn't really see myself going into a traditional job. Like most people, I got my real estate license in my last semester of school. It's during the pandemic in 2020. That's when I got my real estate license. And then I at the time I was in Santa Barbara, and Santa Barbara was a place where it was really small. It's too small to really start up a real estate career. And the next place will be the closest place to Santa Barbara was Los Angeles. I didn't really feel too much attachment to Los Angeles. So I moved back to the Bay Area where I had originally lived for a few years because I already knew some of the neighborhoods, had a little connection there. So I moved back to the Bay in 2021 and I started my real estate career.
Now, and I saw, it looks like when you first jumped in, there was maybe a little bit of property management and some other things that you did. Did that help you, I guess, knowing a little bit more about the real estate market?
Exactly. That's a great question. Before I actually sold my first house, I did work in a property management for about 6 months. 6 months, and that's actually how I got my first and second listing. Actually, I got two listings signed from the property management, and I think I just quit. I was like, you know what? This is, because I had plans to become a real estate agent, and I would just work in the property management to ramp things up. And I got two listings at the job, and I told everybody, I say, hey, this has always been what I wanted to do. I really thank you for the opportunity. So I kind of just took the two listings and run with it and just never looked back.
And is that really kind of how your first deal, your first successful real estate transaction started?
Kind of, yes. You know what? Yes. Because when I took my first listing from the property management, it was not an easy listing. It was a listing, we had tenants in place. We had the tenant. Actually, when I got the first listing, my first listing was 1.86 million. It was at the time, um, the seller actually had a listing agreement with another well-known real estate agent in our area, but it was too much trouble for that real estate agent. She didn't want to deal with it anymore. Because the tenant in that house that was really violent, and the tenant actually told her that, you know what? So the tenant basically threatened her, said, "Don't ever come to my house. Don't ever, just don't leave me alone." So she had too much of trouble, and she basically fired my seller. And at the time, being so new in the industry, I was like, you know what? I'll gladly take this on. I have nothing else better to work on.
You weren't scared off.
I,
Yeah.
I wasn't scared off, so I took this project on, and it did, really take a long time to get everything in place to get the property sold.
Well, I mean, that's great. I mean, obviously not so great that the person had to deal with that, but that set things up for you to take this deal on and make that first successful transaction. And as you got going and got some more transactions under your feet, what were some pivotal moments or turning points that made you realize this was really where you wanted to be?
I think the satisfaction that you get each closing, either it's helping buyers get their first home, second home, or helping a seller to sell a home. Beyond the paycheck, I do feel a big sense of accomplishment when each client express their gratitude towards you. Just people when they show off, "Oh, Richie, I thank you so much. You really helped us. You really educate us on this process, or you really went out of your way to help us get what we wanted in terms of the price." So I do think there behind the paycheck a big sense of appreciation that the people that your clients show towards you about the work that you do. I think that really plays a big part of what makes my job meaningful.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're an expert in these areas that they probably know almost nothing about. So, what are some of the unique things that you've developed in your approach to real estate that set you apart? I mean, I think the fact that you're saying you're helping, you're solving a problem for people. I think that that's pretty unique. But on your own, what do you think is kind of unique about the way that you've managed to do this?
I think living in a world where there's just so many real estate agents, I do think trust it's the biggest thing. I think when you meet with a client, you're having that conversation, whether it's through the screen, but most likely in person. When the person you're talking to, either it's a potential client or a current client, when they feel that they can really trust this person, not only that this person has the ability to execute the job, but also this person has my best interest in their heart. So I do think that makes a big difference.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, I think that intention speaks for a lot, and trust, being a big intention is going to really help you, maintain that relationship with people. And this is one of those areas. As a person who has worked for myself, I understand how you can have slowdowns, you can have speed ups. How do you stay motivated during those slowdowns, and then also maintain consistency if things are ramping up in the markets?
That's a great question. I think we're most of us are entering into that season now. At the end of November, December, there really aren't a lot of business to be had because most people are not just buying or selling during these seasons. To be honest with you, it's challenging just to stay motivated to keep the same routine, still wake up early in the morning and either it's going to the gym or track your taxes or start business planning for the next year. Not every day it's easy, but I just gotta getting up and keep grinding.
Yeah, I completely understand. I mean, I, make to-do lists when I really don't have anything to do. But, it keeps you going. And like you're saying, it makes you, get up, makes you set that alarm clock to go off the next morning.
hmm
Um, what are some of the values and principles that guide your daily work? I mean, you've already touched on trusting, but how do you make sure that your clients are really getting that best possible experience that they can from you?
I think a lot of times it's just taking myself back and to really start experience things from the client's perspective. So instead of, oh, do I have instead of thinking it what's next for me in this process, I really trying to start to think what's next for the client in this process. Just trying to put myself in the client's perspective. I think that really helps me to see just just help me to understand what the client is experiencing from their experience.
hmm Yeah, I think that that's a fantastic way, being able to kind of externalize that perspective and think about it from, what do they need to know? You already know, of course, what you think they need to know, but but from their side, what is it that they don't know that they need to know? I think is a great way to to measure how you're making progress and make sure that they feel they're making progress too. Now, you already mentioned too something, when you're having a slowdown, getting up, going to the gym. But as things get busy or as things shift, how do you maintain that kind of balance between your personal and your professional life in real estate, especially if you are in a very demanding time in the industry?
I think as someone who's upcoming, who's relatively new in the industry, I prioritize my business over my personal life. If there's a client that's calling me, and if there's two persons who are calling me at the same time, one is a client, one is a friend, and at this stage of my career, I pick up the phone. I pick the client's call over my friends. So I think it's just a matter of priorities.
Yeah, I can definitely understand how that is as well. Sometimes when you're in charge of your own destiny, you have to say, I've got to pay my bills first, and then
Then I
I've got
gotta
time
nurture my relationships, right? Yeah.
for all of the other things, right? Um, now you've been in this for 4 years. We've obviously been through some really interesting times. What are some of the biggest changes that you've seen in the real estate industry since you started, about 4 years ago?
Uh, I think the biggest thing is definitely the NNR settlement. When I first started in 2021, basically anybody can just call up any agent and then write an offer and will get paid out right away if the offer is accepted and the transaction closed. But that's not the case anymore. Now there is more hoops, that there's more regulations, there's more transparency, there's more education that need to be had upfront with the buyer and or even with the seller before you can get paid. It definitely regulated the industry in a more professional towards the more professional spectrum. But there's definitely more transparency on the table, and there's higher standards also on the table too since I started.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of those probably are intended to help the clients that you're working with. So probably some frustrations and learning curves in that, but it's hard to say that it seems like it's a bad shift. Speaking of shifts, when there are changes that are coming in this, when there are trends, when there are shifts in the marketplace, how do you what's your kind of process in adjusting and adapting to those, or staying ahead of them, really?
Just keep an open mind. I think we go to NNR trainings, car trainings, and also our offices have the trainings from brokers and leadership from the company. Just really attend these, and trying to process it again from the consumer's perspective, and just and also role play with your teammates and your colleagues. Just really, because when it comes to when the NNR thing, when the buyer agreement first, the buyer agreement for really started to take place, we practiced among just teammates about what to say, how to get buyers to get comfortable, what to say when they push back on signing the buyer rep. So it takes practice to get familiar.
Yeah, role playing is definitely, can be mundane, it can be challenging, but it really does bring out, I feel like I've used it myself in training and with people, and it's very helpful, in the long term. So I'm glad to hear that, you're doing some of that. Well, speaking about trends, speaking about shifts, what are some that agents and investors you think should be paying attention to that are happening right now or that you're seeing coming?
I think when it comes to single family homes, people who are on the single family sector, most people are still willing to go with buyer broker agreement. They're willing to commit to working with one buyer agent who's gonna find their next home, and they are committed to working with that one agent. But from the investor segment, not many investors are willing to commit to one buyer because they wanted to see different deals brought to the table from different agents. So it's a different game, really. It's different approach.
Yeah, yeah, I can see those are, there's probably a lot of conflicting things going on there where, investors obviously, they're beholden to getting the best deal for their at the bottom line. So,
Yeah, they're hesitant to tie it up with just one agent.
yeah. Well, looking for people who are going to be listening to this and who are thinking, this is maybe a career for me. This is maybe a path that I want to go down. What would be a piece of advice that you wish somebody had told you when you were actually getting your start?
It's a great question. I think just be prepared to fail. Just really be prepared to fail because when you first starting out, whether you're gonna go solo or whether you're gonna go with the team, there's gonna be a lot of no's before you hear yes. It's really, people say, rejection. It's not only part of the process, but when you get enough rejection, they're just information. They're not rejection anymore, right? So I think you have to be really comfortable to get yourself out there to hear no's, whether that's through in person, whether that's through a phone call, whether that's through email. So there's gonna be a lot of no's before you can make your first transaction. So it's definitely not an easy business, but it's a business that you can build on if you are comfortable just getting rejected and gathering information and just wake up the next day and to renovate a different angle.
Yeah, well, I think, failure is one of those things that a lot of people think like, oh, it's never going to happen to me. I'm never going to be there. But, I think it's inevitable, right? You don't know what you don't know, and many times, and you're going to make mistakes along the way. What are some common mistakes that you see people who are starting out that, or maybe even that you made, we won't reveal which one it is, that you think could easily be avoided by people who are getting started?
When I first started, I was with a very small brokerage. It's a very local brokerage that it's really like a family friendly environment where everybody feels like a family among each other, which is great for the business. But at the time, for any newcomers, that's not really a great environment for any people who's new in the business because as someone new, you want to make connections with people who do a lot of business in your area, and a lot of times these people are in big brands like Compass, Keller Williams, Red Oak in my neighborhood in my industry. So you want to be in a big brokerage where you can make connections with a lot of people who do business in your area and get yourself known, introduce yourself, and converse with these people, build a relationship. I didn't have that in my first brokerage. So I think that's one of the biggest mistake that I would have avoided had I known.
Well, and I can see that, a smaller brokerage where you have people who are kind of, that family type of environment. Long term, I'm sure it's really great to be there when you're well established, but a lot of those bigger firms have education programs. You're going to be doing those role playing examples, and they know that change is happening all the time and very quickly, rather than siloing information. Where somebody's like, well, I don't want Yuchi to know because then he might take away some of my business, and maybe not even intentionally thinking it like that. But in those big businesses, those larger firms, I think, they're used to kind of pivoting because that's how they've built their business.
Yeah, of course. And they have a lot more resources. They have a leadership team, legal counsel team, broker of record, and a lot of top agents. They will talk, in front of the office meetings in the panels. So you have a lot more resources to abstract from as someone who's new. So that's definitely one of the biggest mistake that I made is by joining by joining a very small boutique brokerage versus a big franchise brokerage firm where a lot of top agents that in your area work in that brokerage.
Well, and I think that leads right into the next question too, because I mean, I think you've kind of tiptoed in this area because it sounds like this is probably your recommendation for how somebody should really take their first step if they're looking to scale up.
Yeah, and also finding a mentor. It's definitely one of the most important thing as well. Especially if you haven't done any transaction, you don't know how real estate works at all. Join a top sales team in your area where you can, even if you get 20% of split for the for your first 5, 10 transactions, but you can get that those experiences under your belt by working with the top agent in your area where your confidence is gonna get boosted, which is essential in terms of getting new clients. So I recommend that as well.
Great. Speaking about clients, how do you start to build and maintain those strong relationships with those clients? What's some advice that you have for that?
Just call them, text them. I know it's hard to call nowadays because, I mean, to be honest, I struggle with that too. There's clients who I've closed, I had transaction with last year, 2 years ago. It's so hard to just pick up the phone to call them and say, hey, haven't talked to you for 2 years. How's the house? How's the house? You can only ask that so many times, right? So I think it's a lot of times I try to be their friends on social media, so that way it's easier to just comment or reply to their stories on what they're doing. That feels much more organic than just pick on the phone random and call them.
Yeah, yeah. Nobody likes those just checking in. It's like kind of like, what are you checking in about?
Right. I mean, they know what you're checking in about, right? But they still just to be polite and conversate back. But I think it's just a lot more organic if you just add them on social media.
And social media probably is one of those ways, and this is another question that I had for you about, kind of building your own personal brand. I mean, obviously you are, as you said, with a larger firm, but you want to stand out, you want to make yourself known. What are some ways that you think are keys to building that strong brand in real estate, and how you kind of have built that for yourself?
Think one of the biggest thing is definitely authenticity. You have to really stay authentic to who you are. And I think for myself, my name example, right? My name is Yuchi. It's something that's very unique, and it's you probably don't hear many of that name in any industry. So that's authentic to myself, right? That name is associated with my identity, which is not a very common name, and that could be that's my brand, right? But your brand could be you have awesome hair, or you have a great smile, you have a cool story, whatever that's unique to you. You have to really stay true to that.
And in fairness, you do have a little bit of a marketing background. Thinking about kind of like your brand and what thing you're going to make stand out about yourself is really an exercise that people need to go through.
Definitely, yeah, definitely.
Now, we best laid plans, you build your brand, your things are going right, but sometimes things don't go as planned. What was, can you share a story of a time when maybe something didn't go the way that you had hoped, and how you managed that, and how you handled that?
Last time, it just about a year ago, about 2 years ago, 2020, 2023, and 2022, these years were really tough time for buyers. In our market here in the Bay, in the East Bay, Berkeley, Oakland market, it's really hard for buyers to get their offer accepted. And especially when the interest rate was lower, and we have such shortage of housing here in the East Bay. So every single family homes that's put on the market, usually in 2 weeks, they're gonna receive anywhere from 5 to 25 offers. And your buyer is one of them. Your buyer is one of 5, 10, or 15, sometimes 20 offers. So I think when you're working with them, you spend all those times finding them the home, going through the disclosures with them, going through the comps, and then you end up do place an offer in. But not the first time you're gonna get your offer accepted. So a lot of times you have to go through it many times to get their offer accepted. And those times that's not only frustrating for the client, but also it's frustrating for you as well. I think a lot of times you just gotta keep going. You just gotta tell yourself, I there's I've tried my best, and this is I can't control the outcome because I can't really advise on how much to offer on the home. I can only give them advice. So you just really need to tell yourself, I've delivered the best experience to my client in this transaction that I can, and if we didn't get it, let's move on to the next one.
Yeah, and I think anybody who's gone through the process of buying a house has definitely had that. "Oh, I had my heart set on that one. The house I'm sitting in is the only one that I've intentionally wanted to buy and bought." So there have been several along the way where it was like, well, that was not the house I wanted to be in, but it was a place to be, and it wasn't the one I had my heart set on. But you need a roof over your head, so to speak, in some ways, and it's the only one that was available in my market. So sticking through, making those movements, and in managing those situations, probably has also brought you to some really proud moments. What are some of the proudest moments that you've had as a professional here in the real estate industry?
One of the first one that I can think of is my first listing, right? My first listing, the listing agent who had the listing at the time didn't want to deal with it, and was freaked out and terrified by the situation because the tenant who was living in the house that the realtor trying to sell at the time was violent, right? So they threatened her and they just scare her away. I think I was able to come on someone who's hungry, someone who's brand new. I took on the challenge. I handled the situation. So essentially we bottomed out and we went through a lot of hoops. It took about almost a year to get this property sold and for a great price. There's just beyond the paycheck, there is a big sense of satisfaction that you feel that you've accomplished something that someone else didn't accomplish. So that feels good.
So I bet your goals have probably shifted since that first one that you've had somewhat. You're still fairly new to this, but where do you kind of see yourself going or hope that you're going as far as dreams and goals for the next 5 or 10 years?
Being a real estate agent is great. I do think there's more to be pursued. I think a lot of times when a real estate agent become experienced, once I do become more experienced and I acquire more capital, I would love to get into some of the fixed flip, some buy and flip, buy and hold, and a lot of these burn strategy method on top of selling real estate because I do think selling real estate gives you a lot of perspective on how things work in the real estate industry. So I think I would love to get into these other aspects of real estate to just to keep learning and about the whole real estate industry.
Yeah, I've flipped a house, and I will say that acting as your own general contractor is an experience, and you definitely learn a lot,
Wa-
especially when when timing is of the essence, as it often is.
Was
Um,
it a positive experience for you?
it really was actually, it was definitely taxing. I had to go in and I had to, do some of the work myself. The people that I hired, while they were skilled at what they were skilled at, sometimes not always. And thankfully, while I didn't appreciate it at the time, my father taught me a number of skills that ended up coming in handy and allowed me to finish some jobs that were incomplete by some of the people that I'd hired to come in and do the jobs. But I also found that I was able to actually save quite a bit by kind of splitting up the work, hiring somebody to pull out who is cheaper than the people who were putting in. Because if those people are doing both the pulling out and putting in, the bill can quickly climb. So it was one of those lessons that I learned quickly and early on about doing this. So it was a very interesting property, and I'm sure, this first one that you dealt with probably checked a lot of boxes in the interesting category. Was it the most interesting or kind of unusual property that you've worked with so far?
There's one other instance where there was such a beautiful triplex in Oakland. It was one of the most historic building in Oakland. It was being meticulously restored to its old glory. It's old Victorian, but also mixed with modern updates. They listed the property well below market. The market value, they listed actually like anywhere from 50 to 70% below market value. So they listed at 995,000. And I had a client who wanted to make an offer on this property, and it's his first offer, and our offer ended up being one of 30 offer. So there's 29 other people who also made an offer on this house, and we got it. And we got the house just on the first try without counter offers, just outright. So that was definitely one of the most amazing experience that I think I experienced, and as well as the client. I really don't think he actually fully understand how hard it is to get their offer accepted as their first offer here in the Bay Area. Not only he did that, but also he bid out 29 other offers, and without being the highest price actually. So it was
That is amazing. That
that
is
is something.
absolutely a rarity.
Yeah, that is something I think I'll remember for a long time.
I can't even imagine. I mean, my neighbor's house got 25, and I think that they it was weeks of negotiating with all, like the top 5. So good for you on that one.
What year is that? Is it still this year or a few years
Oh
ago?
gosh, it was like 2 years ago. Yeah,
Right.
2
Yeah.
years ago now, and, yeah, and the funny thing is it's a tiny house on a large amount of property. So, it's just this very unique, piece of land and property and house, and I couldn't believe the lines of people who were trying to get it.
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of like Black Friday a few years ago. It's Black Friday for some TVs, it's for houses.
Yeah, yeah, I'm like, "Boy, I don't know that I'd line up for that," but, I guess I wasn't the target market. Um, if you weren't doing this, like, with the skills you have, knowing what you know, like, if you could go back, what would you maybe think of, as a different career path other than real estate? Or maybe you were already on a different career path when you switched. What would you be doing instead?
If I wasn't selling real estate, I will probably become a fix and flip guy. I'll put all my mind and my energy and my learning ability into learning how to fix and flip, and also fix and hold. Perhaps not in the Bay Area, because in the Bay Area here, it's the capital required. It's substantial. I'll probably move to a different area, maybe Texas or Georgia, and learn in these markets, because it's more doable. I think the cap rates and the numbers, and also it takes a lot less capital to start.
Right, yeah, a lot more flexibility too, I would say, with, some of the neighborhoods and probably, the regulations, of some of that as well in certain areas. Certainly there are places like, Washington, DC, where I wouldn't wanna be doing this, but, 10 years ago, that was a hungry market for people who were looking to do that. So, and you gotta stay on top of those trends. So that'd be a very cool thing. It'd be interesting to see if you end up, kind of going there, as you've already kind of mentioned it now. So let's look at, more about you. What is something that's a fun thing about you that most people may not know about you, or people who are only dealing with you as a real estate agent maybe wouldn't know about you.
I love competing. I love playing basketball. I love playing poker. I love playing pool. I love to win. I think a lot of times when it comes to dealing with other people, it's not only negotiation. It's also um, it's also about how to put yourself forward, and put your client's interest forward, and to really represent them in the best way in the best way possible. So I am very competitive, I would say.
Well, that is a good quality to have, I would say, in the industry that you're in. So that's definitely going to help you and your clients. And I'll remind myself that if I'm ever in your area to make sure that I bring my cue with me so we can have,
Have
play
a
around a
friendly
pool.
competition. Yeah.
Yeah. If you could, kind of think about your dreams about um, where you would like to be in the world, not necessarily for an investment, not necessarily for, for selling, but out any limitation, price, location, style. If you could buy and live in any piece of property that you know of, what would it be and why?
I will either be in Hawaii, Santa Barbara, or San Diego. I think I'm a beach person. There's something that really there's something about the ocean that makes me feel every day when I wake up, the first thing I do is to go to the ocean for a swim. That's I get tremendous energy from that. My neck feels better, my lower back feels better, the rest of my day feels better, and I just love being around the ocean. I think these will be, if it were up to me, and my dream were to be fulfilled, I would love to be in one of these places, buy a property in one of these places.
Well, as a person who's visited Hawaii a couple of times, I will tell you that it's hard to have a bad time when you're there, especially if you like surfing and you're near the North Shore. So,
Exactly.
what's the kind of the craziest, funniest thing that's ever happened while you were in the middle of showing a property? I mean, I wouldn't say that being threatened by, the person at that first property would be a funny thing really, but,
I think a lot of times when you meet a neighbor, when you go, when you go to show a property and a neighbor happens to be there, sometimes a tenant happens to be there, and they tell you too much about the house than you care about, and sometimes it's like, you know what, I've heard enough. But like, no, 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 you haven't heard the stories from 20 years ago about what happened to this house. And but yeah, with your clients, they just bombarding you with the information, and but you're like, in one hand, they're just being so hospitable and enthusiastic about, telling you about the house. But on the other hand, you feel like, we've heard enough. We just want to walk away and take a look at the bathroom again. And but they're still so eager to tell you about everything about the neighborhood of the house. So I think those situations do happen, and it's it's funny. And actually, one of the another funny story I think is this one time, I think the house I told you about, that my client, he got his offer accepted for one of the 30 offers, right? And doing the final walkthrough, we're doing a final walkthrough. It was supposed to be a quick 2 minutes final walkthrough, just me and my client and the seller's agent. But the seller happened to be there. The seller, had probably owned the house for 40 years, and it was first time that he met face to face with the buyer, and he was so excited, and he just literally spent the next 2 hours explained every detail about the house and about the memories, about how everything works, about what was updated a couple years ago, and just so much information that he was so excited to share with my client. And I can tell my client was like, you know what, I've heard enough. Just get me out of here already.
Yeah, at some point it's just like, information overload, I'm sure. Like, write a
Yeah.
book, send it to me.
Exactly. Or do a Q&A, record a Q&A for yourself and send it to me, something like that.
Exactly. Yeah, that's probably even better than writing it. That's definitely a story. Yeah, most of the time when you get a house, there's a lot of imagination about what that backstory is and how, somebody made a decision about something in a house. But to hear it, sometimes I don't know if it would make it better. Before we let you go here, Yuji, where can listeners connect with you? Now we'll tag you in some of your social media, but where would you direct people to learn more about you, learn more about your work?
Yeah, so I primarily do the Bay Area, specifically the East Bay, Berkeley, Oakland area, El Cerrito, Albany. You can find me on Instagram. I'm pretty active there. Nowadays, I post mostly about either my dog or real estate. There's nothing in between.
Yeah.
So, I'm happy to just be friends. You want to go get a coffee, go play basketball, go play poker anywhere here in the East Bay, or if you happen to want to buy a house or sell a house, be happy to connect with you too. So it's Yuqi underscore California. It's YUQI underscore California. Be happy to make a connection there.
All right. Well, great. Well, hopefully we'll direct some people there. Feel free to share this on your social media as well once it goes out. And I look forward to you getting lots of people wondering, what about that triplex? Did were the stories that were involved?
Uh huh.
Those messages on Instagram that you're going to be getting. So thank you very much for joining us, Yuchi, and I hope you continue to rise and and you're able to do that flip and sell or flip and hold that you're thinking about.
Thank you very much, Mel, and I appreciate your taking the time to interview me.
All right. Well, I look forward to hearing more about you and keep listening to the next editions of the podcast here on America's Inner Circle. So.
Thank you very much.